Okay, so good evening class. So this is your module 8 under the nervous system and the senses. Okay, so as I have said, I want to explain the module kasi yung PPT ay hindi complete ang naman. Okay, so I have to explain about the content of your module 8. Okay, so the title of your module 8 is a nervous system and special senses. Okay, so the objectives of this module as follows. By the end of this module, the student should be able to, first is to classify neurons based on their structures. Second is to identify the parts of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Explain how the central nervous system controls the activity of the organs in the body by the concept of the neurons, of the neurotransmission. Fourth, determine the different types of special senses. Then fifth, investigate the actions of the nervous system. I think the sixth part is under the cardiovascular system. Okay, so hindi ko alam kung bakit napunta ito into number 6. So, sa inyong lectures, okay, so makikita nyo dun about the different types or the classification of neurons. Okay, as I have mentioned earlier, okay, about the neurotransmission, the two different classifications of your nervous system, which are the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. The difference between the somatic and then the autonomic nervous system, which is part of your nervous system, and then the special senses. So let us first um, know about the overview of the nervous system. So ito na naman siya lumulutan. Okay, so it says here in your module, okay, so when you say nervous system, it is refers about the nervous system is the one that controls the control center of the human body. So your brain is the one that controls for it, and then the spinal cord is the one that communicates or send information from the motor neurons, okay, to the brain, and also uh, the response of the brain via the spinal cord going to the motor neurons. Okay, so this is the way of the center of communications. It is about um, the yung pag-respond, okay, about the pag-respond ng ating brain to the stimulus, and then so on and so forth. Okay, so it is about the communication between the brain and then the motor skills, and also with through the presence of your spinal cord. Okay, so this is the one that interprets what is happening with the external environment. So for example, di ba, based on the picture in your PPT is that yung napaso siya. So yung surface pala is mainit. Okay, so that is the external environment and that is under the stimulus. Ano yung immediate response niya? So ang kanyang ano is nainitan siya. Of life. Kasi kung wala kang pakiramdam na mainit, ano na lang mangyayari? So this can cause burn. Okay, so the neurons and the role in the nervous system. So we have already discussed about in your cell about the different parts of your neurons. So your neurons are made up of the dendrites. Okay, di ba nakikita nyo sa inyong cell, meron siyang nucleus. So this is under the humans, even the animals, they under sila ng eukaryotes, which means na meron silang presence of nucleus. So this one is the nucleus and this one is the cell body. So yung cell body, parang siyang cytoplasm sa inyong cell. How about when you say cell membrane? So di ba under the humans, walang cell wall, kundi cell membrane, this is the one that protects the cell. So parang siyang as a semi-permeable membrane. Okay, so this is the one that controls the in and out of the cell. How about when you say the dendrites? So ang dendrite, siya yung nagre-receive ng signals from the other cells. Okay, kung merong signal sa other cells, ang dendrites ang tumatanggap. Ang axon is transfer. Okay, siya yung naglilipat. Ibig sabihin, away, siya yung nagbibitbit. Okay, siya yung nagdadala ng messages from cell to another cell. Okay, so ang node of brain behavior, I think ito ay inano ko sa previous ko mga students, but sa inyo ay hindi ko na masyado. So ang focus ko is about the nervous system and the senses. Okay, so in your nervous system, in your neurons, you have three different types. So these are the sensory neurons, the motor neurons, and then the other one is the entor neurons. Okay, so what do you mean about sensory neurons? So when you say it came from the word senses, so kung sinabi yung senses, external environment. So for example, what you see, what you touch, what you hear, so on and so forth, which correspond internal stimuli. So the sensory input stimulates the sensory neurons and carries sensory information towards the brain. So kung ano yung nakikita natin, so for example, yung touch reflex, diba, humawak siya doon sa surface na mainit, it goes, the signals or the information goes into the brain. Okay, so via your spinal cord. So doon dumadaan sa ating spinal cord. How about when you say motor neurons? So when you say motor neurons, this is located in the CNS and extends through axons out of the CNS. This is the most common neuron that carries information from the brain towards the muscles of the body. So meron siyang response sa ating katawan through the presence of our muscles. So our body are made up of different bones, and our muscles is the one that covers before the bones, may mga muscles na tayo. Okay, so like for example, the motor, like for example, yung pag-ouch niya, yung kanyang pag, that is under the motor neurons. How about when you say entor neurons? So when you say entor neurons, that is a combination of your sensory neurons and the motor neurons. So based on the example, ano yung nakita niya? Na-feel niya na mainit. That is under the sensory neurons, touch. Ang motor neurons, tinanggal niya yung kanyang response or ang kanyang kamay. Okay, so that is under the motor neurons. When you say entor neurons class, yan ay combination. Okay, paano in-organize ang nervous system? So they are categorized into two, the CNS or the central nervous system, and then the other one, which is what we call the peripheral nervous system. So when you say central nervous system, it is include your brain and your spinal cord. So that is about the sensations in your external environment. Ano yung nararamdaman mo? Relay the receptors, relate messages to the CNS or into the spinal cord going to your brain. So the CNS takes sensory information from the nervous system. Okay? So the primary rule of your central nervous system ay tatanggap ng information. Okay, from the different areas of the body sa iba't ibang klase. For example, pag kumilos tayo, for example, if there is a presence of pain, diba, kang what you see, okay, so yun yung tumatanggap, okay, tumatanggap ng information from the external environment and then in-interpret ng ating brain. So via your spinal cord. How about when you say the peripheral nervous system? Okay, so dito pala yung nag-umpisa pala yung pag-divide ng dalawang parte ng ating nervous system. How about when you say peripheral nervous system? So this is about the nerves, ugat. Diba? So sabi niya, the central nervous system, it is made of nerves that communicate with the central nervous system. So with your skin, naalala niyo dati, with your dermis, meron na dong nerve endings. So yung nerve endings, diba, siya yung, pag na-touch na yung nerve endings, yun ay magta-transmit ng messages going to your brain. The PNS is divided into categories. Okay, so these are the afferent and then your efferent. When you say afferent, the another term for this is sensory neurons, kung ano yung nakikita, and then the efferent is your motor neurons. So this is the one that carries information from the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so ano ba yung sinasabi ko about the efferent? That is the response of your muscles. Okay, so yun yung ating carrying information from the brain, so mula doon sa ating brain, and via the spinal cord going to our muscles. Okay, sa ating katawan. Okay, and even our glands. Diba, for example, the lacrimal glands, which is responsible para mag-produce ng luha. Okay, the efferent peripheral nervous system, under the motor neurons, are categorized into two. So these are the somatic nervous system, and then the other one, which is what we call the autonomic nervous system. When you say somatic nervous system, okay, so that is under the efferent, which is under the motor neuron, okay, controls the impulses from the brain and the spinal cord to the skeletal muscle. So yung skeletal muscle, ano natin, that is under the voluntary. Okay, so magre-react lang ang ating skeletal muscle but if we do something. That is under the somatic nervous system. But when you say autonomic nervous system, came from the word auto, self, which means kusa siya nagpa-function. So for example, kanina about the airways, the respiratory rate. Okay, kusa tayong humihinga. Okay, so ang fish ay humihinga sa ilalim ng tubig because of the presence of work of gills. Okay, so yung mga swimmers, minsan nakikita nyo, mayroon silang nilalagay ng oxygen. Kasi ang capacity natin sa ilalim ng tubig ay hindi masyadong tumakal. But sometimes, di ba, when we are doing swimming, di ba nakikita natin, pag nagsuswim tayo, bumubuga tayo sa ilalim kasi lumalanghap tayo ng ating oxygen supply. Okay, so that is under the autonomic nervous system. Even the heartbeat. Okay, your heartbeat, ano ba yung heartbeat? Yung cardiac rate natin. Okay, the respiratory rate, ano pa ba? The digestive process, the nervous system. Okay, so that is under the smooth muscle tissues. Okay, so uncontrollable. Pag kumain ka ng pagkain, hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na, oy, wag ka muna mag-digest. That is under the autonomic nervous system. So the organ involved by this system receives nerve fibers came from the two division of the ANS. So these are the sympathetic division, and then the other one is what we call the parasympathetic division. So as I have said, ang sympathetic, that is under the fight or flight, and then ang nakakaluwag or nagko-control ng effect ng sympathetic is what we call the parasympathetic. So if there is a vasoconstriction, ang gagawin ng parasympathetic is tuluwagan. So pag sinabi siyang vasoconstriction and class, umiiksi yung daluyan. So ang gagawin ng ating parasympathetic ay luluwagan. Okay? So pag nagdadilate ang ating pupil, di ba napapansin nyo, nilalagyan nyo yan, for example, sa emergency room, pag pumasok na sa hospital, nilalagyan nila yun ng flashlight. Okay? Kasi if there is something wrong with the brain, so magdadilate yung pupil natin. Walang reaction sa lights. Or even the blink reflex, di ba? So that is, ang gagawin naman ng parasympathetic nervous system class is the opposite. So binavasodilate niya or niluluwagan niya or kung vasodilation o malaki ang kanyang pupil, ang gagawin naman ng parasympathetic is opposite. Pag kung nagdi-decrease ang heart rate mo, under the sympathetic, ipa-increase naman. So that is parang opposite ang kanilang function. Okay. So the central nervous system involves energies in norepinephrine as the neurotransmitter is. So the epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is the use of parasympathetic division used as a stimulant and speed up the vegetative activities. Like for example, the neurotransmitter, so on and so forth. Okay. The central nervous system, okay, so it is made up of the brain and then the spinal cord. So the brain is one of the largest organs of the body because even the liver, which is one of the largest internal organ. So the weight of the brain is about 3 pounds with an average under the adult brain. So meron siyang cranial bones ang ating brain, at itong cranial bones, and that is what we call, and another is the meninges. Okay, so ibig sabihin, meron tayong cranium, cranial bones, nagpo-protect ng ating brain. Okay, and then the meninges. Yung meninges, meron kasing cerebrospinal fluids doon. So that para walang fraction. But we're focusing now with your meninges later. Okay, I think hindi siya nakapwesto dito. Okay, the brain is divided into 4 major parts. So these are the brain stem. Okay, the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and then the encephalon. Okay, this one. So let us first tackle about the brain stem. So di bang sabi ko sa inyo, class, this is your cerebellum. Below that is your brain stem bago mag-spinal cord. So your brain stem are divided into 3 parts. So these are the medulla oblongata, and then the other one is the pons, and then the midbrain. So when you say medulla oblongata, this is an ascending and descending tracts connecting the spinal cord and the different parts of the brain. Okay, so the tracts are made up of white matter of the medulla, while your pons, ito yung bridge. Okay, connect the spinal cord and then the brain. Okay, so wala palang picture dun, pero nandun sa inyong PPT. Okay, so that is the one that connects or the bridge between your brain and then your spinal column. Spinal cord is your pons. Okay, so tingnan nyo na lang sa PPT, and then your medulla oblongata, and then the other one is the midbrain. Okay, so the another term for your midbrain is the mesencephalon. Okay, the second one, aside from your brainstem, is your diencephalon. So ano naman yung diencephalon? This is a superior to the midbrain. So ibig sabihin, ang midbrain is part of the brainstem. Ang diencephalon ay makikita doon at the superior portion of your midbrain. So nakita niyo yung parang maliit doon. Di ba the cerebrum, yung malaking parte, the diencephalon, and then the cerebellum. Okay, sa baba nun is the brainstem. So that is the superior portion of the midbrain. Nakikita siya at the above portion of the midbrain at meron siyang dalawang hemispheres. Hindi yung left and then the right kasi under the cerebrum. Sa diencephalon ay meron kayong thalamus and then the hypothalamus. Okay, so ano yung function ng ating thalamus? This is a superior portion of the diencephalon. So makikita sa superior part ng thalamus, sa baba naman ng parte ang inyong hypothalamus. So this is the principal sensorialization impulses. Okay, so the brainstem and the cerebrum parts. It has an important role in interpreting the conscious if there is a presence of pain and temperature and some sense of pressure and touch. Okay, the hypothalamus is found in the inferior. So your diencephalon at the upper portion, okay, dun mo makikita ang iyong thalamus, the superior portion, and then the inferior portion, when you say inferior, sa baba of your diencephalon. Okay, so this is the one that maintains the homeostasis. Your hypothalamus is the one that controls your, dito lang nakakalito pag pumasok na kasi yung brainstem. Okay, so like for example, the one that regulates your breathing process, the blood pressure, okay, konektado rin yun sa brainstem. So here is your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus is the one that controls your heart. Okay, so pag sinabi ng puso natin na ito ay tumibok sa in-love ka or mayroon kang crush, okay, your hypothalamus is the one that controls it pag ikaw control mo. Okay, pag hindi mo ginamit. Sabihin ay, nag-aaral pa ako. So the one that controls your. Even, okay, so the cerebrum. Okay, it's here that your hypothalamus is the one that maintains the homeostasis. Okay, so your cerebrum is divided into, as I've said, the largest or the aside from your cerebrum kasi ang pinaka-first na, pinakamalaking parte ng ating brain. Second lang yung ating cerebellum. Okay, maliit siya. So your cerebrum are divided into two hemispheres, the right and then the left hemisphere. Okay, when you say the right hemisphere, this is the one that controls the movements of the left side. So, kung titingnan nyo doon sa inyong PowerPoint, ang kinokontrol ng left brain natin is the right hand. Why? Kasi extremities in class. So, the opposite kasi ng ating parte ng ating katawan, pag may diferensya ang ating parte ng ating brain. So, for example, for the paralyzed person. So, pag paralyzed siya, pag nakakita kayo dyan class, like for example, may nakita kayong anong tawag dito, may nakita kayo na paralyzed tapos ang kaliwang parte ang kanyang naapektuhan, ang right brain na affected. Okay, so the hemisphere, ang bawat hemisphere nito, the right and then the left hemisphere, ay meron silang parte ng lobes. Okay, yung frontal lobes, di ba frontal bone doon sa inyong skeletal, ito man ay lobes kasi that is under the brain. Okay, so yung lobes na yon, itong pinakaharap is what you call the frontal, abot dito. Then the next one is the parietal lobe, and then the occipital, ang temporal dito sa gilid ng ating tenga. Okay, so the frontal lobe is the anterior portion of each hemisphere, that the one that controls the voluntary aggression. Okay, so yung occipital naman, which is found at the back portion dito, pagkatapos ng ating parietal. This is the one that pagdating sa visual, ang occipital. Ang parietal naman is that sensory information. Okay, so on and so forth. So the one that separates the frontal and your parietal lobes. So kung papansinin mo, this is your frontal and your parietal lobe. This is the central. Ang nasa gitna, okay, that is what you call the central sulcus. While the lateral portion, which is the one that separate the lateral sulcus separates the cerebrum of the frontal, the temporal, and then the parietal. So, but I think this is on the lateral portion, sa gilid. Okay, so that is what you call the lateral sulcus. The fourth one, aside from your brainstem, your diencephalon, your cerebrum, is your cerebellum, which is the second largest. Ang pinaka-largest is the cerebrum. Okay, so para siyang butterfly. okay, which is located underneath the occipital lobe. So this one is your parietal occipital to sa likod, your cerebellum. Diba, this one is your cerebellum, and then this one is your occipital, and then this one is your cerebellum. Okay, this one is your brainstem. Okay, so how about when you say the cerebellum is one to move the fingers, that quick repetition of accents like playing games. It's made up of white matter. Okay? How about when you say the spinal cord? So next dito ay yung mahaba yung spinal cord. Okay, so the one that protects the spinal cord is your spinal column. Okay, starts at the continuation of your medulla oblongata of the brainstem. Since this is your brainstem kasi class, so continuation ng inyong brainstem is your spinal cord. So the spinal cord carries the information from the other parts of the body and from the brain. So, ibig sabihin, mula dun sa brain papunta sa katawan or mula sa katawan papunta sa brain, dumadaan sa spinal cord. Okay? So, the spinal cord carries the information from the other parts. Okay? So, the one that covers the spinal cord, okay, is what you call the meninges. Okay? So, there are 3 layers which are found here are the dura mater, the arachnoid, and then the other one is what we call the pia mater. Okay, ano yan? So the meninges are membranous covers of the spinal cord, which are made up, the meninges are made up of 3 layers. So these are the dura mater, the arachnoid, as I have said, the outermost layer. Ang kasunod yun is the arachnoid. And then the next one is the pia, yung pinaka-inner portion. Okay. So the PNS have 2 major subdivisions. Diba yung kanina, the somatic nervous system and then the autonomic nervous system. Diba yung kanina explain ko dun kanina about the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so when you say somatic, that is under the muscles, the skeletal muscles, so which means voluntary. So pag hindi mo yan itupi ang iyong knees, that is under the somatic nervous system, hindi siya gagalaw. Okay, pag hindi mo, like for example, kinagat ka ng langgam, tapos sinayaan mo lang siya, that is under the somatic nervous system kasi that is voluntary. But when you say autonomic nervous system, that is uncontrollable. So for example, the digestive process, okay, use ng mga hydrochloric acids in your stomach. So pag nakatikim na yan ng pagkain, continuous kasi ang pagproduce ng katawan ng stomach natin ng hydrochloric acid. Okay? It helps to digest food. Okay, you have to be careful for that kasi like for example, dahil continuous ang production ng ating hydrochloric acid, paano? Doon nagkukos minsan ng stomach ulcer. Why? Kasi wala siyang tutunawin. The digestive process or the final absorption of your intestine. Diba? Pag nagda-digest na yung ating intestine class, okay, that is automatic. Hindi yan pwede sabihin mo, huwag ka muna mag-digest once na kumain ka. So, continuous ang kanyang trabaho. Okay, your liver is the one that regulates ng mga toxins, even the fats, your kidneys, di ba? Iniipon lang dun sa inyong urine, na bladder, your heart beats, okay, continuous yun, yung sweat, ang pagpuproduce ng sweat natin, and then the glands, like the salivary and then the digestive glands. Okay. Okay, so your autonomic nervous system are divided into 2, the sympathetic nervous system and then the sympathetic and then the parasympathetic, opposite sila klasa. So pag merong activation that is under the sympathetic, so you feel if your heart beats fast, so pag mabilis, ang reaction ng parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite. Okay, this is the one that reserves and restores. Ang sympathetic naman, siya naman yun yung during fight or flight response. Okay, so magkaiba sila ng responses. Okay, so this one, the central nervous system. Okay, this one is the internal and then the external factors. Okay, so maari na yun ay under the sensory or motor neurons, yung interneurons kanina na diniscuss. Okay, the PNS is made up of nerves which are responsible to carry signals between the CNS and the parts which are found out of the CNS. So maliban sa brain and then spinal cord, the PNS are responsible for this. Why? Because of the nerves. So meron tayong cranial nerves and then meron tayong, what do you call that? Spinal nerves. So ang dami nating nerves sa ating katawan to send impulses. Okay, there are 3 major jobs of your peripheral nervous system. So the senses. So we are using our sense, the sense of touch, the sense of hearing, the sense of sight, and pa ba. So the PNS gathers information from the outside environment. So di ba, ito yung outside world. Tapos ang PNS, if there is something with the nerves, okay, the PNS, pag meron na siyang reaction doon, for example, pag nasaktan ka or binato ka, okay, that is external factor. And then it carries the information using the nerves going to the spinal cord, going to the brain. So the cranial nerves. So ang cranial nerves I found in the nerves which are found into your brain. So unlike the peripheral nervous system, have special senses. Okay, so directly to the brain. So these nerves bring signals from the nose, ears, mouth, and other organs. So the peripheral nervous system, they are fused or joined together to form all over the body. Okay, so how about when you say movement? So pag kilos, that is under the movement. So like for example, when you are running, so that is under the voluntary, ibig sabihin, controllable. Okay? How about when you say unconscious process? So ano ba yun sa psyche nyo? Meron kayong conscious, subconscious, and then the unconscious processes. Unconscious, ibig sabihin nun hindi nyo alam. So that is under the autonomic nervous system. So both here, okay? So sabi dito, there are two main parts of your peripheral nervous system. So this unconscious, that is under the involuntary. Okay, the movements that is under the voluntary. And then your senses is that I think it is under the involuntary. Okay, so check natin to later. I think meron akong nilagay dito. Okay, so the cranial nerves ang spinal cord natin are made up of, the peripheral nervous system, it is not the spinal cord, are made up of your cranial nerves and then the spinal nerves. So ang cranial nerves natin ay meron siyang 12 pairs and yung spinal nerves ay meron 31 pairs. Okay, how about when you say neurotransmitters? So the neurotransmitters, these are substances which neurons communicate with each other. So ito yung ginagamit ng ating nervous system. Di ba, ang endocrine system, anong pinoproduce? Endocrine, the glands. Okay, the neurotransmitters, mas mabilis ang reaction compared to the endocrine system. Why? Because ang glands muna ay isinasubmit into the bloodstream. Ang neurotransmitters direct kasi. So mabilis ang kanyang reaction. So there are 14 neurotransmitters of the nervous system. So may mga nangyayari, but there are almost neurotransmitters. I think mas mahigit pa. Okay, so iba ang meaning nito iba ang function ng neurotransmitters under the psychology students. Okay, neurotransmitters are located at the part of the neuron which is known as the axon terminal. So napapansin nyo sa ilalim na portion yun ng inyong neuron, the axon terminal. Kasi doon yun yung pagko-connect ng dalawa para mag-transmit ng messages going to the neurotransmitters para mag-react. So the neurotransmitters are transmitted into three possible actions. So when you say excitatory. So this is to fire off the message. Excite, ilalabas. When you say inhibit, controlin. Okay, when you say modulatory, came from the word module, or nasa gitna, which influence the effects of chemical messengers. They are able to adjust on how cells communicate with the synapse, which affects at the same time the energy. So dapat ito yung nasa cell about the synapses. Okay, so the mediator, that's what you call the modulatory. So yun yung excitatory, paglabas, inhibitory, pagko-control. Okay, so the spatial senses, the first one here is the sense of smell. Okay, the sense of smell is also known as your olfactory sense. Okay, pangamoy. Okay, so dissolve the mucous epithelial lining, which is found at the superior and nasal concave of the nose. So the dendrites found at the uppermost shell of the epithelium. So through the axon of the neuron, so on and so forth. Okay, basta olfactory ang inyong sense of smell. The sense of taste. So meron kayong taste bud sa inyong tongue. Diba meron siyang pakiramdam about the taste ng food. Ito ba ay sour? Ito ba ay bitter? Ito ba ay sweet? Okay, so meron silang portion. Okay, as it binds with the receptor, the process makes the electrical charge change in the receptor cell. So magti-triggers ang pag-release ng neurotransmitters. So the chemical messenger initiates the electrical urge of the nearby neuron. So from cell to cell. Okay, so makikipag-communicate siya from cell to another cell and signals the back to taste the bitter. Okay? The tip of the tongue used to taste the sweet, pating pinakamataas, the sour, and the salty at the sides of the tongue, and then sa backbone yung bitter. So, yun yung apat na taste ng ating sense of taste. Okay? The aging of illness, habang tumatanda, okay, nagbabago na rin yung panglasa. It says here that both the neurological disorders may be the sign of decline olfaction. So, pag nagdi-decline yung sense of, the olfaction is the sense of smell, olfactory. Okay. So, pag nawawalan siya ng panglasa, and one of the factors here is the neurological disorders. Ano yon? Okay, the Parkinson's and the Alzheimer's. Hindi ko yung pagkalimot. The sense of sight. Okay, yung paggamit natin ng ating mga mata. So, the eyelids, the eyelashes. So, yun yung mga nagpro-protect against the foreign objects. So, nagbi-blink tayo. Okay, so meron tayong mga luha using the blinking of the eyelids is the one that lubricates and produce from the lacrimal gland ng ating luha. So the tears ay yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na meron kayong hole dyan sa inyong mata, titingnan nyo yung meron sa dyan, dyan lumalabas ang ating luha. Okay, produced by your lacrimal gland. Okay, the tears are not only used for lubricants, but also fight the bacterial infection. Siya yung naglilinis ng ating mata. Okay, the sense of hearing and then the equilibrium. As I have said, klase, magkasama yan. Pag meron kang vertigo, paano malalaman na pag may problema ka at magkakaroon siya ng tendency na magkakaroon ng imbalance sa katawan natin is that may umuugong. Okay, minsan may mga butas yun sila. Okay, butas kung ginagawa ng paraan ng mga doktor yon. So, minsan, ang sign noon is that with vertigo, yung pagbigla. Kasi may disequilibrium klase. So, there is something wrong with the sense of hearing or the ears. Okay? So, the sound waves pass down to the outer ear, which is the auditory canal. It strikes the eardrum. So, yung eardrum natin, yung tympanic membrane, para mag-vibrate at makakarinig tayo. Okay, ano yung pinakatatlong tiny bony ossicles? So, these are the humor, the anvil, and then the stirrup. Okay, the ossicles are responsible for magnifying the magnitude of your vibration. Okay, so on and so forth. So, yun yung snail shell. Okay, so you have to read your module. Okay, so mag-ready kayo for your quiz. You can answer your quiz sa Friday. Tapos tsaka ko i-submit ang inyong laboratory. Okay, 1 week naman yun. Okay, so talagang kailangan lang kasi tapusin ang inyong grado. Okay, so good luck for your finals at sana mahila at mahatak nyo ang inyong mga grado. Okay? So I think ang highest sa inyo is 1.5. Pero hindi kasi may compute. Kasi gawin yung times 2 yung class ha, ang inyong grado para makuha nyo. So bukas ko siya sasabihin. Okay, so that is the end of our, so this is for 3-1. 3-2 kasi is tomorrow. Isa lang naman ang inyong recorded discussion.